Hi, I'm Carcina.
Oh, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
No one knows Carcino and none of these.
There's so much going on in the world, and I'm just giving my 2 cents on it. Go in and do a raid at someone's house, but you don't have an arrest warrant for them.
What's up? What's up? What's up? Now, a lot of y'all want to know, why did Young Thug get to go home, and why this whole thing stemmed from high heaven with cases and charges that's all messed up, and it's a mess. This is looking like the Diddy case, but I told y'all it was all political, and people didn't understand why things turned around to look the way they did. It was all political. And with the election being less than a week away, what did they do? What they do, y'all? With the election being less than a week away, they go ahead and they resolve the Young Thug case. So the Young Thug can go vote, and the black folks who was pissed off about all this can feel okay and good because Thugger is home right before election. But look and listen, because it's clear to understand what the narratives are, right? It's clear to understand what the situation is. It's clear to understand what the major problem is and the major damage. It's clear. Listen to Thugger's lawyer explain everything in the case. Even though they finna take this plea, listen to him break this down. It was the most concise breakdown I've heard of how in the hell did we get here if everything this man said, which was true, and especially after the last person testified, a mistrial was clearly in the works here. And with the election taking place, they did not want to have that happen. So, what was the scenario? Oh, we have to cook the books. We got to get something cooked up and make it stick. We had to get something in there and using rap lyrics to translate what you want to see. Yeah, it don't make sense. But don't worry. We're going to get to the gist of it. And just so you can understand what this is all about. And oh, yeah, Gilbert Arenas was fired, ladies and gentlemen, from Nightcap. He's no longer on Nightcap. He was fired. That's Gilbert Arenas, y'all. He was fired. So just got to, remind people of that. His services was no longer needed in the community, and they made sure. Well, the ratings was low when he was on there, and it's a business, man. It is what it is. But without further ado, let's listen to Young Thug's lawyer break down what happened.
Many of the statements made by the prosecutor we vehemently disagree with. The prosecutor misstated many pieces of evidence and then took liberty that that is the state's theory. Mr. Williams has tendered a nolo contendere plea to the RICO conspiracy count. And in that count, there are several overt acts. And the first one, Your Honor, deals with a traffic stop. It's on September 9th of 2013. And I won't go through every one because it might take a long time, but just for completeness for this, the court knows, Mr. Williams is driving a car. There is a dash cam video of the stop. The officer who testified at the trial 11 years later, the case was, a gun was found under the passenger seat. Mr. Williams is not tied to the gun. He's not convicted of that. And the dash cam video that the officer said would have picked up sound as well as definitely video was never turned over to us, supposedly lost. Could not explain the loss. The armed robbery.
That's strange.
Another overt act of Mr. Dodson, D-O-D-S-O-N, has the following information. The state only, because we haven't called witnesses yet. So the state put up a man who said nothing except, I don't recall. And then they put in his prior recorded jail calls. That man was taken, his name is Mr. Bean, B-E-A-N. He was taken to Grady Hospital and he was spoken with by a detective. The state vehemently accused me of lying to the jury, that the man never went, Mr. Bean was never taken to Grady Hospital, and that somehow I planted on him to say something on a recording where he said, the reason I implicated Jeffrey Williams is because the police told me that it would be easier for me. Then I had to go through the CAD reports and show that Mr. Bean was in fact taken to Grady Hospital, and Mr. Bean on recording told Detective Quinn, who of course told the truth. Yes, when I spoke to the detective previously, I did lie. Then what the state doesn't tell the jury is that there's another man in the car. He is shot at the scene. He's arrested. He pled guilty. His name is Fred Prethro, P-R-E-T-H-O. And Mr. Prethro is in the Georgia State prison system, easy to find. Mr. Prethro was in Grady Hospital also, unfortunately suffering from a gunshot wound. And you can hear the medical equipment behind him. And Detective Williams came in and was recording the whole conversation and said how many people were in the car. And Mr. Prethro names the people. Adrian Bean, who's the gentleman I just said, himself, and Walter Murphy. Are you sure there weren't a fourth person in the car? No, the three of us. The state doesn't call that person. The state does call Detective Williams. So I wanted to ask and inquire on that. The state, to obstruct, if that's obstruction, asked the predecessor court to prohibit me from getting into the fact of any conversation that would have impeached another witness. It's fine. Fred Prethro's on my witness list as well as the detective, and I have the recordings. In addition to that, Walter Murphy gave a statement while in the hospital, and his statement is very interesting. It's two different police reports, signed the same date, which is September 11th of 2013. And on the first 7 lines of the police report, they're identical. Then all of a sudden, when it gets to on the right-hand police report, it says Mr. Murphy stated that there were 3 people, I believe, I have to go back, in the vehicle. On the other police report, it states Mr. Murphy stated there were 4 people. There's no reason that they should be different. They're both signed the same. The state doesn't call that officer at all. I tried to ask Mr. Murphy about it. The state objects, and the predecessor judge sustained the objection. Mr. Williams was not involved in the Mr. Dodson. Miss Bennett, that was Mother's Day, May 12, 2013. She reports allegedly an armed robbery. The detective who testified here and investigated stated he never took out arrest warrants from Mr. Williams. And he wrote in his police report, Miss Bennett is not truthful. That is the case that the state is talking about. The state then, there was Brady evidence that they don't turn over, and we find out about it in court after they arrest Miss Bennett because they say she's not cooperating, and it comes out that she told the prosecution over and over again that this did not happen the way that she reported it, and she doesn't remember. As to Donovan Thomas, and Mr. Williams has nothing but empathy, sympathy, and sorrow. They were friends. It is a lie. What the prosecution put before this jury is a lie. What happened here is the prosecution comes up with a theory because they need a motive, they think. I know you don't need a motive in reality to prove a murder case or any other case, but they wanted a motive. So they made it where Mr. Williams and a gentleman named Rich Homie Kwan, his name is Mr. Lamar, he's a performer, and Mr. Williams and Mr. Lamar were close. There are public documents, recordings, Mr. Lamar being interviewed almost every year, and then he talks about his time with this band or group called Rich Gang. And he says every year up to this past year, he, God forbid, died. We can't call him as a witness, how close he is to Mr. Williams. The state, though, made it in this case, or tried to make it, that Mr. Williams and Rich Homie Kwan are enemies because Rich Homie Kwan will not sign with a record label that has nothing to do with Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams doesn't sign to that record label. That record label is owned by a gentleman named Brian Williams, also goes by Birdman. Wildly successful. He started Drake's career. He started
Man,
Mr.
don't
Dwayne
mention
Carter,
my name
performer known as Lil
nobody.
Wayne's career. He started Nicki Minaj's career. Just fabulous, powerful person, well respected in the industry. But the state wants it to be that Donovan Thomas interceded and would not let Rich Homie Kwan sign to Mr. Brian Birdman Williams, and that is the reason that Jeffrey Williams had a feud and killed Donovan Thomas. Your Honor, what the evidence would really show if we kept going to trial, and I could tell you that Mr. Adams and I never thought we'd be in front of this honorable court. We always thought it would go all the way through trial. Was the state is saying that Rich Homie Kwan and Jeffrey Williams don't speak since the fall, and they have a bad relationship the fall of 2014. We would have shown, and we served on the state, December 15th, 2014, Jeffrey Williams in a private plane with Mr. Lamar or Rich Homie Kwan, and they are high-fiving and laughing with each other. That is on audio video. There's a man who the state hasn't called yet, Mr. Martinez Arnold, also known as Duke. It's on the state's witness list. He's represented by the Honorable Ashley Merchant. He's on that plane as well. He would have identified the item, and he would have testified that Mr. Williams and Mr. Lamar were very close in December 2014. Then on December 29th of 2014, Mr. Williams, Mr. Rich Homie Kwan, Mr. Arnold, others were at Brian Williams' home in Miami, Florida. There was a posting by Mr. Lamar, Rich Homie Kwan, and a picture of Mr. Arnold and Mr. Lamar, and they said, Mr. Lamar says, "This is my number one man, Duke," or something to that effect. We would have put that into evidence. In addition to that, Your Honor, on December 8th, 2 days before Mr. Thomas, God forbid, was killed, Mr. Williams is with Mr. Thomas, as well as Mr. Sledge and Brian Williams in Brian Williams' tour bus outside of a fabulous entertainer, artist, Mr. Clifford Harris, T.I.'s studio. And at that time, they were very close. But you also have the detective with the gang unit, Detective Underwood. I asked her within the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks, did you do any, and she was on the gang unit the entire time, including today. And I asked her, do you have any evidence about Mr. Williams and Mr. Thomas being close friends? And she said, yes, of course I knew that. I said, how about in January of 2015, close to time of Mr. Thomas's death? She said, yes, they were close friends. Mr. Michael Sprinkle, he's a deputy district attorney in the Fulton County DA's office. He has a recording with Mr. Treadwell. You've heard the name O.G. Bentley. And in that, they're going through the evidence. And Mr. Treadwell, it's important because he has a child, too, actually, with Mr. Thomas's sister. So he's family. And Mr. Sprinkle states this is 2018. This is after the rental car. This is after all of the interviews of Mr. Copeland. This is after the interviews of Mr. Zachary. Mr. Sprinkle's in some of those interviews with Mr. Zachary. Mr. Sprinkle on tape, on recording, states, I do not know why anybody thinks Jeffrey Williams is involved in this killing. He and Donovan Thomas were close friends. It makes no sense to anyone. And Mr. Williams was never arrested, never charged, even in this, as the court just noted, with anything to do with Donovan Thomas's, God forbid, killing. In addition to that, Donovan Thomas has a place that he used to stay with a group of people on Auburn Avenue. Jeffrey Williams performed and did a music shoot there to try to help other people who are suffering in poverty to get out and to be able to be seen and to broadcast their music. Jeffrey Williams does that for everybody because he comes, Your Honor, from the struggle of total poverty, seeing people killed. He saw his brother die right in front of him, and the law enforcement, I'm not blaming anybody, everybody's on edge, but law enforcement would not get any help for him because there are all these people around. It is just what Mr. Williams has gone through is wrong for everyone. It's not just Mr. Williams, it's that whole community, but he's trying to get people out of poverty and out of that community. I have been with Mr. Williams where we have gone to speak with children together, and he tells them, don't be a rapper. Be like Brian, be a lawyer, keep in school. He tells his children, get your education. His family, his whole being, Your Honor, is trying to break the chains of poverty for others, and it has been.
Now, of course, this lawyer is getting his money on right now, but the overall picture of it is he's right. They have railroaded this guy from the actual jump, from the giddy up. Railroad. And the fact of the matter that you're looking at a trial that was the longest in history, and you're looking and you're listening to how they were cooking the books, hiding information, not submitting and turning over information to the defense that they were using in the trial itself, which was illegal, should have been a mistrial. It's the longest trial in Georgia history. They did everything they could to try to get a conviction, but it's hard to prove a RICO in a street situation when you don't have any hard concrete evidence in this trial. There's no real physical evidence in this trial. Everything is like circumstantial and not really connected. It's weird. It's weird. Listen to this.
Spun in this courtroom with false statements and allegations against Mr. Williams at every turn. In addition to that, Your Honor, the state talks about the fact that Mr. Williams takes people to Miami. You would have heard evidence if we went forward. I put all these people on my witness list. Not one person on my witness list,
not one,
has been interviewed by law enforcement or the prosecution.
Why?
They have investigated this case for 15 years.
Woo!
They haven't interviewed all these people. That Sprinter van that you heard about, that was already booked days before. Going to Miami, Florida, Mr. Williams and Mr. Brian Birdman Williams, they did a video shoot for a music video. If anybody would have gone further with the expert for the state, they would have seen that Mr. Williams' cell phone does not contact any of the co-defendants that are named here in Miami, and Mr. Williams stays at a separate location than any of those persons, he would always take people who can't afford it on airplanes, on buses, on tours, to his concerts. He let everyone go because, Your Honor, they never left that area. He wanted to show people you have an opportunity. The world is big. Mr. Williams gave jobs to everybody who'd want to work. He'd give them jobs and security. And I'm not insulting them. They really weren't their jobs, but they were being mentored, but they were given titles and tried to give them respect and opportunity. But if they did not wish to work, Mr. Williams would not allow them to work with them. This has all been turned on its head by the state. The fact that the state has put in Mr. Williams' lyrics are offensive. Mr. Williams has tens of thousands of recordings. On our witness list, we are bringing in all of his people, his recording artists, his engineers, his managers, his record label, and an expert, the Honorable Dr. Eric Nielsen, to talk about how Mr. Williams creates his music. His music is then changed around and merged. Mr. Williams, some of the lyrics you just heard are not even uttered by Mr. Williams. The state has no idea when these lyrics were made. Some of them were made before the shooting of Donovan Thomas, that the state is saying this applies to the Donovan Thomas killing with the Tahoe. They are so far afield of where we need to be when we are trying to, God forbid, take somebody's liberty, Your Honor. The state is talking about things like F the judge and I rep my life for real. That's not even said by Mr. Williams, but they don't care to find out. They are on a tunnel vision to try to convict a man who should not be convicted. The statement about I never killed nobody, but I got something to do with that body. If the state just bothered to talk with anybody, that is a Nicki Minaj song with Jeffrey Williams. It is written by Nicki Minaj. That is on the text messages I gave, not the text message, the Instagram or Twitter rather, that I gave to the state. That is out well up before this, but the state doesn't care. This was out in 2015 or 16 or 17 or 18, I can't remember, I think 18, where Mr. Williams was asked who wrote anybody, and his response is anybody was written by Nicki Minaj, and it was. But it was really written and sung. It's a takeoff of a song by Tupac. There's a song that it parallels, which is an inspiration. But here we are with the state. Also, I never killed nobody, but I got something to do with the body. The next line comes up is it's a truancy body. The state can't explain that, so they just conveniently leave it out. Your Honor, there were wiretaps on this case. Mr. Williams, it was going to come out, there was an application to wiretap his phone. The state never presented to a judge. That speaks volumes. The leader of the YSL criminal street gang, who's been involved from 2012 until his arrest, and even according to the state, while we sit here, they never even tried to wiretap his phone. It might have been because they don't really know what his phone number is. So all these communications you're being told about with Mr. Huey, I'm not so sure the state could have gotten anybody to say that's Mr. Williams' phone. This is how the trial has gone for us. But we sit here for almost 2 years since we did our jury selection initiation on January 4th, 2023. Mr. Williams has been sitting in a jail since May 9th, 2022. This is 2.5 years waiting for the conclusion of the state's case and a verdict from the jury. And that's why he is tendering this plea. I'm telling the court this, and the court knows when you came out the first time, it's very hard for Mr. Williams. I am not supportive of what we're doing right now. I'm not against it. But I told Mr. Williams, that I think we're winning the trial and we should go to verdict. But he told me I can't wait another 3 months if there is any possibility I could go home because I have children that are hurting. I have things to do, and he has some medical issues that he would like to tend to. He eats out of a bag, Your Honor. He eats processed food only. He gained 75 pounds during trial. He's lost it since, but it is hard. You know, for me, it's only 3 more months. It's enjoyable, actually. I enjoy coming. It's not that enjoyable for Mr. Williams. He told me he wakes up. I said, he wakes up every day, and it's another day in HE blank blank. Your Honor, the state is talking about, in this case, they put in social media. This honorable court was not here, but the state put in that Mr. Williams, in the indictment, Mr. Williams put out a call for murder. He put $24 million murder for hire on a person's head. That is a lot of money, and that is awful. If they would have read the chat, the Instagram chat, Mr. Williams, right above it, there's a picture of a very well-known, very accomplished musical artist who actually had surgically implanted in his forehead a pink diamond worth $24 million that day. That's what Mr. Williams would talk about. That
Right. Who pays $24 million on a hit? We was talking about the $1 million hit they talking about on Tupac. I think $24 million for a hit, for a hit of somebody that don't nobody know of stature, and the state was gonna use that in a lyric as evidence. It's egregious. I can't believe some of this stuff was even being allowed in a court of law. So you think about the Diddy case. Think about the Diddy case. That's what I want y'all to do. Think about the Diddy case. Think about that. Y'all can talk about like, man, the conviction rate is the conviction rate. It ain't about the conviction rate. It's about the faulty evidence. Shouldn't be any conviction in this. But they find a way to make it happen. Right? Now listen to how egregious it is. He gained 75 pounds in jail because he was eating processed food.
That's the type of evidence that is coming from the state of Georgia in this case. It is wrong. This is all wrong. And I know we're pleading guilty, and I know we're pleading nolo, and I know we're asking this honorable court for a certain sentence, and we'll get to it with the court's permission. But this is the type of evidence that there is. But it is holding this man hostage. And that's not really what we're supposed to do, district attorney time in the state of Georgia or anywhere. The state then, because I opened on that, then they never bothered to put in all of the chats. Why did it take me to read the chats? In addition to that, going back to Donovan Thomas, talk about Mr. Williams involved, the state did a geofence. A geofence tracks his devices. It doesn't have to be a phone. It could be an iPad. It could be any type of electronic device that targets and is used. You don't have to be on the phone. It's the contact. If he has an app open, it'll capture it. And the state targeted the McDonald's, where they keep saying that Mr. Williams met with people there. They targeted the barbershop where, God forbid, the killing occurred. And they targeted a third location, no, 2 locations. And it comes out, Ms. Williams' devices are not there. It's exculpatory. I don't get that information. I got that because I interviewed Lieutenant Crabtree, and the results can't be found, according to prosecution. I did a motion for that. They just can't find it. That is great evidence for Mr. Williams. It would have also shown clearly that when he does go down from his house after getting this call that I'll talk about from Demise McMullen, he's not with these other people. And the expert for the state, the FBI agent who does the telephone analysis, Mr. Williams' phone does not ping off the same tower as a Demise McMullen or a Mr. Copeland or a Mr. Garlington or whomever. The state of Georgia has misrepresented for 2 years in front of this jury. They have hidden evidence. They have violated Brady. They have falsely accused Mr. Williams. Your Honor, saying that Mr. Williams gets that call 7 minutes after, the state said 6, it was 7 minutes after the killing of Donovan Thomas from Demise McMullen. Mr. Williams was already out of his home. Mr. Demise McMullen's calling Mr. Williams. He's not even there. He's going down to meet with Mr. Kelvin Treadwell, also known as O.G. Bentley. O.G. Bentley was supposed to go to Miami, Florida. They were talking about this deal. And Mr. Williams, that day, he was given another contract. Mr. Williams, by this time, he went from zero money. He is a multimillionaire at the time. He doesn't need the Cleveland Avenue drug deals.
Exactly. What would he need that for now? At this point. But they're not going to allow the young thug to enterprise. And what they want to do is that we got to clean up Atlanta right before election. We got to have all this going on. Atlanta going to be clean so we can have these events. Ain't going to be no shootings, none of that.
$15. He doesn't need the shootings. He wasn't even living in Atlanta since 2018, 19, 20, 21. He came back the very end of 21, 6 months, and he got arrested in May of 2022. In his house, Your Honor, we have everyone on the witness list. There are 12 people living at that house. Mr. Williams opens up any of a car that he has. He'll rent cars for people. Any home he has, he will allow people to live in hotels because people that he knows, unfortunately, are homeless. And he gives them all places to stay, cars to drive around. He is not involved in criminal activity. Mr. Williams just got back in our country. His passport shows it. Right before he was arrested on May 9th of 2022, there were other people in that house with the drugs and the guns. There are people the guns are in their names. They were going to come in court and claim the guns. Everybody else was doing as well, but Mr. Williams has entered a guilty plea. I'm not going back on that, but I just want you to know that this case is just wrong to do to somebody with no bond and to hold him hostage. He wants to, you may not do it. He's aware of that. He's aware of that. But the state offered him 15 years on probation, but they keep piling on these conditions. He just said, he made up his mind. He said, I'm just going to go with it. I got to get home. Judge may not let me home, but I'm not doing these conditions and admit that I'm the leader and I'm involved in the killing and my music just promoted everybody to do it. He's not going to do that. So he did not do that. And that's how we wound up here. The state, the night of the killing, people came to Mr. Williams' home. The state tells the court, he said, lay low. What they don't tell you is right after that, he gave money to Mr. Sledge, who said, they're going to kill me. They think I did it. And Mr. Williams said, if you had anything to do with it, I don't want to be with you. And Mr. Sledge said, I just need a hotel room with my children and my bride or my significant other to get to. And Mr. Williams said, be safe, lay low. That's the lay low. In addition to that, Mr. Williams told Mr. Copeland's with the police. Hours after the killing of Mr. Donovan Thomas, Mr. Copeland goes to the police department. Mr. Williams is the person who told him to go. Mr. Copeland said, what do I do? They're shooting at my house, at my family's house, at my significant other's mother's house. And Mr. Williams said, if you had anything to do with the murder, get out of here. Mr. Copeland denied it. And Mr. Williams said, then go tell the police. Mr. Copeland said, you want me to go to the police? And Mr. Williams said, if you had nothing to do with it, they think you did it. Go to the police. In addition to that, Mr. Copeland said, well, I'm going to retaliate. Mr. Williams told him, don't do that. Let 12 handle. That's on recordings. That is on recordings on January 11th of 2015 with Detective Thorpe. Your Honor, as far as Dwayne Carter, performing.
Now they're gonna go into Lil Wayne. Now, let that sink in. You see how they took one thing he said and the prosecution tried to turn it into what they wanted it to be. And they got it on tape. That's the crazy part. They got it on tape. They got the whole thing on tape. Yeah, it's weird because I'm like, wait a minute, they got this whole thing on tape. Everybody know the scope of what's going on. So it's kind of weird that they having all this go down. And they got the whole scenes, everything on tape. And he's saying, oh, to lay low. Like, oh, he did it. So he told him to lay low, like he put out the hit. They omitted everything that he said. Let 12 handle it. If you ain't had nothing to do with it, let 12 handle it. Totally not the case, or not what I thought they was going to actually pursue in the situation altogether. Now let's get into this Lil Wayne thing.
Known as Lil Wayne, Mr. Williams had no conflict with him. They are friends. We were presenting evidence that right before this shooting of the tour bus is April 26th of 2015. Mr. Williams is performing in New Orleans area. And that's the area where it's Holly Grove, where Mr. Carter, or Lil Wayne, a performer known as Lil Wayne, comes from. And in order to drum up popularity and interest, people get on the internet and they start what's called rap battles, arguments, feuds. That's what happened here. And you would have heard testimony from Mr. Williams' management that they said, start a rap battle. It'll be better for your career. Mr. Dwayne Carter is aware of that. Mr. Dwayne Carter is interviewed. The state's aware of this. He has interviews after this. Are you mad? What's the real deal with Jeffrey Williams? He states, no, he's great with me. He brought popularity to me. He loves me. He idolizes me, and I love working with him. They did an album together. In 2014, they're in the studio together, making music together. It is all made up that Mr. Williams is involved. Mr. Williams gives a statement. The state refuses to put it in and then stop me, the previous judge, from cross-examining the detective. His name is Racy. He met with Mr. Williams in the DeKalb County Jail on the 15th day of July 2015. Mr. Williams is arrested that day. And there's a long interview. Mr. Williams waives his right to counsel. He tells them, I'm his lawyer. They say, you don't want to speak to us? You don't have to. He said, well, I'll speak with you. And they asked Mr. Williams these questions. What about Lil Wayne's shooting? He said, it was outrageous. I love him. That's my idol. I love Lil Wayne. How about this battle? He says it's promotion. They asked him about his rap lyrics. It's the only person that the state ever did anything about rap lyrics with. And they asked Mr. Williams, what about the rap lyrics? And he tells them, it's hyperbole. He didn't use that word. He used the word, it's made up. It's rhyming. It's made up. Not like the state is saying that I rap lyrics for real. That's not even Mr. Williams' utterance. Your Honor, The point I'm trying to make to you is what the state of Georgia has presented to this jury in this courtroom the past year has been full of untruths, and they know it. The state says that Mr. Williams had a conflict because he named an album with Dwayne Carter, and Dwayne Carter didn't like that. Dwayne Carter's interviewed. He said, that was one of the nicest things anyone could have done to me. It shows how much he really appreciates me. It shows respect and honor, and I appreciate what he did. The state knows this. With regards to Jimmy Winfrey, what the state did is they put in a recording. It's not Mr. Williams. It's a jail recording, Mr. Winfrey and an unknown person. And then unknown person says, when you get out, you're going to get a Porsche and $250,000. Mr. Williams not privy to that. The state looked at all of Mr. Williams' bank records, everything. They undressed him financially. There's zero evidence Mr. Williams did anything for Mr. Winfrey. The state tells you that Mr. Winfrey asked for money for a lawyer. The conversation was, and it's recorded, it was with Mr. Williams' manager. And Jimmy Winfrey said, I need to show that I was gainfully employed for the court. Can you get me something from YSL? And the manager said, yeah, if we have it, and if it's true, yes, you can have it. That is it. There's no evidence that Mr. Williams paid for anybody's lawyer, Mr. Winfrey or otherwise. In addition to that, Your Honor, the social media postings with Mr. Rashawn Bennett, also known as YFN Lucci. So Mr. Williams, the state tells Mr. Bennett on social media, I would have killed you if I didn't like the way you take care of your mother and children. That is the post. What they don't tell you is Mr. Bennett, who is also, to his credit, trying to drum up his career. Mr. Bennett is picking on Mr. Williams, who's a much higher profile artist than Mr. Bennett at that time. And Mr. Bennett is saying that he slept with Mr. Williams' fiance while Mr. Williams and she are a significant couple, that Mr. Williams' music is awful. Nobody should listen to his music ever. Mr. Williams responds by saying, we can do an album together if you want. Stop this. The man continues of how he's sleeping with Mr. Williams' significant other, and then Mr. Williams responds by saying, I would have killed you except for what you do. That is the context that they don't tell you about. And Mr. Williams did nothing to Mr. Bennett. In fact, the evidence would have shown, if we had time or we would have gone forward, that Mr. Bennett and Mr. Williams are on the red carpet receiving awards in California, sitting right next to each other and taking photographs. This is not the Jeffrey Williams. Jeffrey Williams is a known person who is all over the place. If he did something, somebody wanted him, they can find him. He is not hanging out on Cleveland Avenue. What the state is saying are not true. The situation with Mr. Bennett, so he's in the Fulton County Jail, and he's housed, and there are crazy, sick, violent people, and they're on the phone, and Mr. Myrick, M-Y-R-I-C, is calling other people, supposed co-conspirators. How much will Jeffrey Williams give? He doesn't say that, but that's the theme of it, as well as Christian Eppinger. What the state doesn't tell you is that when Mr. Sumlin is asked, hey, find out how much Thug will pay me to kill Mr. YFN Lucci, Mr. Sumlin says, I don't know his number. I can't get in touch with him. He doesn't talk to me. And that's because, Your Honor, since 2015, and he means no insult, but Jeffrey Williams has had zero contact with Shannon Stillwell until this case, Kenneth Copeland, Debunking Garlington, Justin Cobb, Demise McMullen, Mr. Sledge, Mr. Murphy, all these people. This is a lie. This is a 100% lie, and that's why we tendered a no-low plea to being a leader of a criminal street gang. Mr. Williams is not a leader. In fact, if it would go forward, on Mr. Huey's phone, there are conversations with Mr. Copeland. And they both say how Jeffrey Williams is a zero and F him. And they don't talk to him, and Jeffrey Williams never does anything for them. Mr. Huey, Mr. Williams met later. He met him closer in the time of 2020. Mr. Huey's father went through a horrible episode that Mr. Williams knew, and that's how Mr. Williams knew his son, Mr. Huey. And Mr. Huey's on hard times, and Mr. Huey's making mistakes. And Mr. Huey, supposedly, Mr. Williams believes, armed robbed a man named Chandler Durham, D-U-R-H-A-M. Mr. Durham is Mr. Williams. He's a fabulous record engineer. And Mr. Williams states, give him back, tell him to give back the property or he's going to die. The state puts that as an overt act. No one dies. The property doesn't get returned. Mr. Huey ignores Mr. Williams. The state told you today that Jeffrey Williams sent Mr. Huey a posting that Mr. YFM Lucci is going to be performing on January 19, 2020. That's not true. Mr. Huey sent that to whoever phone that was. And all it says is slat and slatty. Well, I went out to the places.
He went out to the places to go do it. He did the job that the prosecution wasn't going to do.
That Mr. Bennett was supposed to perform. There's no shooting. There was no fight. There was nothing to report. There's nothing here. In addition, the state says same thing on September 12th, September 2nd, 2022 on Mr. Huey's phone. I'm not conceding that was Jeffrey Williams even having a conversation with him, but even if it was, it doesn't show anything. It says slatty, lay low. Lay low means don't do anything. Get out of the way. That is what it is. That is Mr. Williams' role. Mr. Williams, there is evidence in the record, and there would have been more. He takes people on tour with him. He takes people.
Look, straight up and down, that dude right there has broken down the entire case, and their evidence against him is faulty, ridiculous at best. And because of it, because the evidence is spotty, because the evidence is all over the place, and what they say scopatory, they had no case really. They drugged this thing out with no real evidence to make it seem as if he was the gang leader. They tried to flip lyrics in a rap song to fit it to a crime when they never investigated. They took one part out of a lyric and tried to create a case. And the fact that people were going for it just because the feds got involved. This is what I keep trying to tell you. The feds did a raid. The feds did this. The feds got that. The feds are not, and I repeat, the feds are not the end all be all. Okay? They make mistakes. They do what they can do to try to get a conviction. It's not necessarily the truth. 9 times out of 10 is false. Everything that they pushing and perpetuating is rhetoric. But you start to see in the end who the real people are. So this is why he's got 15 years of probation. He took it because he accepted the no contest to that. just so he can get home. But 15 years of probation, damn, how you gonna survive that? You gonna survive 15 years without violating any crime whatsoever. And you thug, can't stay in Atlanta. It's gonna find you. And oh yeah, Gilbert Arenas was fired, yo, from Nightcap. Just thought I wanted to, let people know that. So anyway, I'm gonna get up out of here. Shouts out to Kwame Brown, Bus Life, Ticket TV, Dreamers Pro. Pay attention to the Diddy trial because this is the same type of situation. It's the feds. So you gotta, make sure you're paying attention. And don't forget to go on the Patreon. We got Queen Latifah information. We got a whole bunch of information going down. You might want to check that out.